The next chapter asked teachers to reflect upon their earliest years in the classrooms. And I'd like to share Carolyn Skeen's reflections on her early years. She is now at Linden Elementary in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. She said, I taught art from 1965 to 1969 in a school that contained grades 1 through 8. The school was in an area that was rapidly changing from agricultural to suburban, as was extremely overcrowded. I rarely had a class with under 41 students. One year I actually had 50 8th grade boys in a room designed for a maximum of 35. It had only one sink, little storage, and nowhere to dry student work. My classes were back-to-back, and I don't remember ever having a planning period. I taught the same 900 to 1,000 students every week all year. Class periods were so short that students barely had time to do a little art, quickly set up for the next class, and clean their hands. I was 22 years old and had lots of energy, but every afternoon I would come home, stagger to the bedroom, and fall across the bed like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop. I made $4,300 during my first year. I was never formally observed by my principal. I understood that he stood outside our classroom and listened to what was going on occasionally. We were also supposed to be observed by someone from the central office once a year until we received tenure. The first year, the personnel director walked briskly into the art room with a clipboard in his hand. It was Friday afternoon. The last students had just left. I was at my desk for the only time that day. I had closed my eyes, my head down on the desk, my mouth open, and my arms flung wide out. My hands dangled down off either side of the desk. I looked like roadkill. Wet student work was scattered everywhere. There was a week's worth of paint spills waiting to be cleaned off the counter. His visit was a short one. I only remember his making one comment. Maybe you should make your classes help you clean up. And one more, from Sonia Pratt, Southern Garrett High School, Oakland, Maryland. Sonia said, I was hired directly out of college in 1972 to start a new art program for grades 1 through 12 in a rural area of West Virginia. Full of optimism, high energy, and a dose of naivete, out to change the world. Art was never offered in this area before. I started my day in one of two isolated elementary schools where I taught on alternate weeks. One was located in an old coal camp. I rolled up my windows and locked my doors to protect myself from both the coal dust and the miners as I drove around the tipple of the top of the hill where the school was. Stray dogs were always hanging around the school, and most days I would have to shout and swing my bag of supplies at the dogs to get to the front door. I had to carry all the essentials like scissors from school to school. Inside were 4 classrooms, grades 1 through 4. I taught first grade on Monday, second on Tuesday, etc. I carried water in buckets from the first floor water fountain to each class. The children loved it when I came. They lived in extreme poverty and had very little in loss. They loved making art and were really uninhibited. They would applaud when I came into the classroom. I haven't heard applause since then. When I left that school, I had to race a coal train to get to the junior high school, which was about 7 miles away. If I didn't beat the train, I had to sit and wait for 15 to 20 minutes for it to pass, and I would be late for my next assignment. If I were late, the principal would be at the door waiting for me and berate me for my tardiness. He said he couldn't see any reason for art in the public schools anyway. In the junior high, I shared a classroom with a health teacher who had never had to share his room. I was given a small student locker to store my supplies, and I was never able to fill that. For all of the schools, I scrounged materials whenever I could find them. I asked for donated materials from friends, relatives, and parents. Every afternoon, I taught high school art. Several years before my arrival, someone had passed away and left a house to the school to use to teach home economics, wherein the students would learn to run a house. I was assigned to teach art in the living room and dining room of this house and could use the kitchen for water and cleanup. My classes were small and the kids were enthusiastic. They would sit on the living room sofa or at the dining room table while I taught them about art and art history from college textbooks and demonstrated from my own sketchbook. They were an attentive group. I had no discipline problems, and some of them came from some hardcore situations. Everything I taught was new to them. I was well into the groove of things when we left for Easter vacation. It was not an easy job, but I felt I was accomplishing so many things. On Easter Sunday, the junior high burned to the ground. Evidently, a student teacher was trying to hatch some eggs in science class. He had left a light on some eggs nestled in the hay. The hay caught fire, and the school was history. We had about 4 days off. Our schedules were rearranged, and I ended the school year teaching the junior high students in the second-floor bedroom of the home ec house. Chairs were arranged wall to wall, and the heat was insufferable. I had only crayons, scissors, and papers to work with. I resigned at the end of the year. During that first year of teaching, I learned more about surviving as a teacher than I would ever probably learn in the life of my career. How's my time? Oh, I'm good. The next chapter is called Experiences, the Stories People Live. And here's the focal question that I pose to these classroom veterans. Could you share any particular stories about your real-life teaching experiences that might encapsulate or impart the essence of what it's been like to be a classroom teacher for the last quarter of a century? I'm looking for a true narrative of something that you experienced within your teaching career, something that might serve as an embodiment of your teaching experiences. And first I'll share a short one by Sharon Henderhan at Ethel McKnight Elementary School in East Windsor, New Jersey. This is called Mixing Up the Sex Thing with the Art Thing. When I changed schools in my district, I found that many pages in the books in my new classroom had been stapled together by the teacher before me. I realized that I must step lightly around the subject of nudity. I waited until I had a student teacher who could serve as a witness in the classroom in case a problem arose. I started with the very safe Matisse blue paper cutouts. Finally, a child asked the question, "Are they naked?" We had a discussion, and I asked, "What do you think?" And eventually, why do artists put clothes on the subject sometimes and don't at other times? They had very good ideas about studying clothing in people's bodies and realized that the clothes would interfere if the drawing of the human body itself were really the focus. I asked what they thought made some people comfortable with studying the pictures of the body and others uncomfortable. The most insightful answer came from a third grader who said, "I think they get the art thing mixed up with the sex thing, and they don't know how to react." And then one more from Laura McNeese Barrett from Holyoke Magnet Middle School for the Arts in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And by the way, that school has since closed last year because of the lack of funding. It's a very sad situation. Laura's story is called Teaching Raul. This year I taught a young man of Puerto Rican descent who was probably the most talented person I have ever taught in my life. He was a real cool kid, admired by his peers, a terrific athlete, and absolutely in love with art. We'll call him Raul, and he was in my drawing class. I had heard about Raul from friends who taught in his elementary school, and I had hoped to have Raul in the 6th grade, but there was no room in my school until the following year. As a 7th grader, he was good, but very undisciplined. His line when drawing was uncontrolled. I saved the first piece he proudly did in my room and challenged him to do better. Raul was in a race against himself. Highly competitive, he wanted to be the best. He was better than most of the others, but there was not enough distance between himself and the wannabes. The question was always there for the others. What did Raul do? Which one is Raul's? I held his first drawing up on a regular basis, and then the second to compare with it, and then the third, and so on. After his third drawing was complete, Raul hung his head every time I pulled out the first drawing, where the lines were wild, the cross-hatching was crude, irregular, the composition not strong enough. One day, not long after Raul came to my class for a still life, I put out colored blocks on a white cloth. Raul went wild. He saw the reflections of the colored blocks bouncing off the white fabric. He ran around to the other 3 tables and excitedly challenged the others to see what he saw, and they did. I pulled out bottles and filled them with water. Raoul immediately saw what happened to the stems of the flowers when they pierced the water and excitedly showed the others. He was hooked. They were hooked. From then on, I learned from Raoul. I heard him describe to other students what he saw. I found things harder and harder for him to draw. I had to think of how I would present a drawing challenge so that not only would everyone else understand, but so Raoul would be challenged as well. He grew by leaps and bounds. I saved every piece he worked on, whether during school or during my weekly office hours, or when Raoul stayed through to 5 o'clock while I had in-service training for other teachers in my room. His drawing ability soon exceeded mine. Raoul won contest after contest, including a gold key in the National Scholastic Art Contest when he was in the 8th grade. I told him that I would buy his drawing for the $100 offer if, for some reason, one of the sponsors did not pick it up. I discussed it with his father, who approved. The drawing came back from the contest unsold and went on to be hung in the citywide art show. Raoul brought his family and friends to the opening, and a proud Raoul stood before his drawing and asked me to be in the photo with him. I've known enough cool 8th graders to realize that this was an unusual request, and I was delighted. Several weeks later, on class day, Raoul received the award for Outstanding Achievement in Drawing. In addition to the usual gold charm awarded by the school, I purchased Raoul a handsome portfolio into which I placed every piece of art he had done at the school, complete with beveled mats. I spoke about Raoul and about how much I had learned from him, how much everyone had learned from him, and how he had presented a challenge to me that I welcomed and enjoyed. He hugged me in front of his peers, and there were tears in his eyes. About an hour later, the guidance counselor came to my room and asked if she could talk to me. Apparently, Raoul had gone to her for guidance. He told her that I had given him everything, and that I had even bought his drawing, the one that he could have given to me. And now he was left not knowing what to do. He wanted to give me something for all I had done for him. What Raoul didn't understand was that I didn't need a drawing to remember him, but that a student like him comes along maybe once in a lifetime, and that what I will remember him with is deep in my heart and not framed on a wall. Raoul has no money to spend on a gift for me. I need nothing. I told the counselor that what Raoul could do for me was to make something of himself so that I could once again recognize what an amazing person he was.